If you're new to our stream this week, obviously you have something to do with MCP, so here you are. We've got a great presentation this week. Our speaker, Arnav, founder of Concierge AI, is joining us from Bangalore. Welcome. And hello, Darren, our usual co-host here, chief architect at OBOT. I'm also stepping in for Shannon this week. He is out. I support Shannon's team here at OBOT. Let's get into it for today. I'm going to hand it over to Arnav, our speaker today. He will be talking about his app, Concierge, and building MCP servers with it.
Thanks, Connie. So before we dive in, just some quick insights into the MCP growth. We see MCP adoption rapidly increasing. The usage of MCP in open source repos increased like 3,600 times since it was released in November 24. Official MCP SDK downloads month over month are increasing, 250 times increase since the initial release. So we see MCP adoption increasing a lot, and we are at a stage where these constructs like tools and resources are out there and they're well matured. But there are new use cases that are coming up that use these existing constructs to build powerful applications. And that's what Concierge is about. So the key problem statement that we are dealing with is high token usage, right? Because to use MCP, you have to configure a lot of tokens. They eat up the context window. There's lack of determinism. The agent does not know the order of tool calls. That's hard to determine on the client side when there's a server and multiple servers exposing their own different tools. And two different servers can expose a tool called search tool, and it's hard for the LM to determine which tool it is. There's also semantic loss. Agent often is unaware of which tools are relevant to the current user query, because often you've loaded all the tools, the entire server, one shot, and now the agent has to play the guesswork. So another problem that we see is most servers are stateless. That means multi-turn conversations and maintaining server-side state is really, really hard. And I'll direct your attention to the graph on the right, which is the number of tools on the x-axis and y-axis, the tokens they use. So right off the bat, at 100 tools, you'll start to see 32,000 token window usage elapsed. For the latest models of Claude 4.5, 4.6 that have 200,000 token usage, that number is around 550. So there's really a hard limit at which you start to see the limitations of MCP if you just configure everything as a flat tool list. And Concierge alleviates some of these concerns by allowing you with dynamic tool refresh, persistent state, stateful servers, and a lot more. So this is Concierge, and the idea is that you can now organize all of your tools into stages and into groups of tools, and you can define relationships between these stages. And the beauty is that if a model is at a given stage, it's only exposed the tools of this given stage and nothing else. The model can decide to transition into other stages, and that's when the server invokes a tool refresh to the client gets a new tool set, and it basically gets a new context to deal with. So instead of previously bombarding the server, the client with hundreds of tools, you're now exposing limited context that the agent interacts with. It chooses to unlock newer context, and using that context, it performs newer tasks. So this is an example of an e-commerce workflow where you have a bunch of things you can do. You can view your order history, you can view payment methods, you can manage addresses, update profile. All of these are tools. You can view product details, and the list goes on. So if you had configured hundreds of these tools as flat tool lists, you would have elapsed your token usage. There's semantic loss, lack of determinism. With Concierge, we group it all together in a browse stage, in a product stage, in a checkout stage, post-purchase stage. What this ensures is that the agent does not end up checking out without adding any items to the cart, and the server owners can actually maintain a degree of control in how the client is expected to interact with their server. And there's also this notion of transitions where you can connect different stages and define legal moves from one stage to another. And this is something that's available to the model. We also support transactions where the agent can enter a transaction and any operation that it performs is completely irreversible. This is done through a shared state. Each tool has access to a memory. It can update some things in the state. All of this state is always snapshotted. So therefore, when you enter a transaction and you don't complete a transaction, but you end up making some tool calls, editing the state, all of that state edit is completely reversible if you do not end the transaction or you don't terminate the workflow. And this is really helpful if the agent was stuck in between, it couldn't figure out how to accomplish the desired goal, or if the user asked you to do something else, you're not stuck in this half complete state. And therefore, Concierge is more useful for workflows that alter the state of the system, that are dealing with high stake scenarios, that perform like permanent automations. All of this is backed by Postgres, and the complete thing is fully stateful. So there's a stage local state and there's a global state. So things like credentials, user preferences, all of this is always accessible to all the tools. If one of the tools just updates that as a state, other tools can easily access. And this also takes the burden of responsibility from the LLM. Instead of the LLM getting the output from one tool and passing that as input to the other, all of this is also a lot of directed towards the server side, where one tool can update its result and the other tool in the future can access that result. And of course, you get analytics, observability, user management, rate limiting, and a lot of other features. This is the infrastructure of Concierge. So there's two basic layers of Concierge. The first is the deployment platform, where using the UI, using the CLI, using the SDK, you can upload your app and give it to Concierge. We have real-time analytics that provide you with graphs, with insights into top tools, throughput, error rates, visualizations, a lot more. Log service that is backed by open source that provides real-time stream of logs, up to terabytes of log storage. Evaluations, where we provide LLM as a judge, stress test. This is really interesting. I'll actually talk more about this later in the demo, where you can have LLM as a judge and mock thousands of conversations and check how the server is reacting to it. On the second side of things, we have the serving engine, which exposes sticky sessions, high availability MCP, multi-pod setup, auth, which is a basic Kubernetes app with a couple of replicas. Actually, turns out deploying MCP in high availability for multi-turn stateful modes is hard, because one of the replicas can produce a session ID during initialization, and you always have to make sure that the same session ID is redirected to the same replica. So the Concierge serving engine takes care of it, makes sure load balancing is correct. We always send the same request to the same replica, so that way each of it knows of the existing state, and when the client wants to connect and interact with the server, it always resumes from the same state. We also have other third-party integrations. You can export all of this data to Datadog. You can have PagerDuty alerts on top of it. A lot of other interesting stuff. Concierge is completely Apache 2.0 open source. So you can bring your own cloud. You can install this on your own infrastructure and get the benefits as well. So now let's go to a quick demo. So this is the Concierge homepage. You get a small playground, and we'll actually see this in action and see how Concierge helps. So this is a MySQL migration workflow. So this is a typical fast MCP server that's meant to perform a database migration for you. And you have a bunch of tools like draining connections, creating a backup, validating the backup, applying migrations, validating state, running smoke tests, switching traffic. A bunch of tools where the agent is supposed to make sense out of this and perform ambiguous user tasks. And here we've just registered this as a typical MCP app. On the other side, we have Concierge, which also uses MCP as the transport layer, but it provides its own state and its own constructs that make it really easy for agents to interact with the server. And all you do is you create an MCP instance and give it to Concierge. And now your app has superpowers. So again, the same thing, we define the same tools, the same definitions, but towards the end, what we've done with this server is we've introduced stages where you now define these logical tool groups that are similar in nature. So a stage for draining connections, another stage for creating a backup, another stage for validating the backup, applying migrations, so on. We've also added transitions here using Concierge. So this is automatically provided as soon as you install Concierge. And with this, you direct that the sequence of operations that, hey, after drain connections, you can only create a backup. You create a backup, you validate a backup, and once you have validated the backup, only then can you apply a migration. And this enforces this flow of order to the client by dynamic tool refresh and limited context visibility at each point of time. So I think let's actually deploy this again with Concierge CLI. It just takes one command. You can do Concierge deploy. Within a second, you'll have a public link. Within a few seconds, the link is up. For convenience, I have actually deployed both of these servers on a public URL, and let's actually test them out and compare how they work. So conveniently, Concierge homepage also offers a playground where you can bring your own server, you can connect to it, you can bring the other server, and let's also connect to that. So these two servers are the same things that we just discussed side by side. On the left, we have flat tool lists where you have all 9 tools exposed as independent tools and the agent can do anything with it. On the right, you just made one line of code change, made it a concierge workflow, and now this is a much more opinionated MCP server where you only have drain connection, which is the first step, and then you can proceed to other stages, which is a task, which is a tool, and you can terminate session. So let's just say, hey, perform a database migration for me for the month of Jan 26. And let's see what happens. Yeah, so it looks like on the left, the agent is already complete with flat tool list. So it just one-shotted. It saw that it needs to perform a database migration and it invoked the apply migration. And it just says, hey, this is done, this is complete. Of course, it didn't call other tools like running smoke tests because what the heck is that? The agent probably has no idea about what these tools are and the order in which they must be called. On the right, this is through the opinionated concierge workflow. You'll see that a bunch of tool calls were performed. We first started with draining the connection pool. We moved on, we created a backup, we validated the backup, we apply the migration, and we validate the state. And this makes sure that the backup is validated, the migration is applied, and the state is valid. If this was a wrong migration, it would have also reverted back to a previous backup. But you'll see that if you use an agent and just load your MCP server with a bunch of tools, the chances of non-deterministic results increase. And if this was your production database, it could have actually gone to toast because there's no validation, there's no backup, and you directly attempted a migration. And in different runs, you'll start to see different results, different tool call invocations, different order of tool calls, all of which Concierge eliminates. So our customers usually find Concierge really, really helpful for high-stake environments where the cost of error is costly and is irreversible. You often require ordering between tools and tool groups. You need limited exposure of context. So instead of bombarding the server with all of your tools, you basically give the server a way to expose limited context and allowing the agent to unlock newer context. Some of the customer use cases where Concierge is used is for database operations, infrastructure bring up, secret rotation, service deletion. So all of these use cases that require a bunch of steps that must be done in order. And this is not just a linear chain. This can be a graph. This can be many tools that are configured within a state. So you can still continue to give agent autonomy, but you can limit that autonomy by adding guardrails and server-side expectations and opinions of how the server owners expect this server to be used. And let's actually go through the scale. So we process over 10,000 events per day. We've performed 1,000 plus evaluations. Each evaluation is hundreds of prompts that are human mocked and tested against the server. Over 60,000 messages are exchanged on Concierge. You'll see a massive reduction in token usage because now instead of loading the entire context in the LLM's window, you're now exposing only a limited context at a given time and allowing the agent to move forward. There's also an improvement in the task completion accuracy and a reduction in inference time per tool call. I'll also take a small minute and go through evaluation because I think this is super important. So this is the Concierge app, and right off the bat, you can evaluate, you can deploy your servers, you can get deeper insights, you can get real-time logs, analytics, you can see how your server is behaving, the top tools across time, what's the success rate, so on and so forth. So let's actually try evaluating a random server. So I think this is a server that OpenAI has made really popular with its pizza MCP UI rendering capabilities. So let's see how this performs. So we've just triggered a evaluation on this server, and Concierge understands what the server is, what the tools are, generates human prompts that ideally a human or you as a developer would manually type and assert that the model is doing well. It does this for hundreds of combinations, checks the output, validates whether the conversation was a good experience, gives a report, gives you suggestions to optimize tool descriptions, prompt descriptions, and a lot more. Uh, and coming back, we have a lot of other things planned as well. We have an approval mode where you can have just mark a tool with a destructive action, and Concierge dynamically renders a UI in the client chat, asking the user whether they want to approve or reject. We'll soon have agents on the server side, so A to A, where the tool is essentially an agent that has a lot more context of the server, of how the server is supposed to be used, and return back limited context. You'll soon be able to build concierge workflows on a UI using drag and drop, and share pre-built workflows with your team and colleagues. So a lot of exciting stuff is planned. Would love to know more and collaborate if you are also seeing similar problems around MCP, and if you're looking for collaboration. So if you scan this QR code, it will take you to our GitHub, and you can install Concierge, see it for yourself. This is our website and our GitHub. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arnav. This is super exciting stuff.
Yes. So Arnav, so I was curious. So when you expose, so it's like if you take the MCP tools, you showed like the raw one, like where just the individual tools, and then you put it, wrapped by Concierge. What is the actual tool interface that you're showing to the LLM? Like, what is the LLM actually sending? Is it like, does it construct a prompt, or like, did you actually show that? I'm just kind of curious, what that looks like, about how it actually communicates with the backend system.
Yeah, that's a great question, Darren. So what you can do is annotate a stage. So let me actually share my screen again. So you can actually add an @concierge.stage here, and you can define your own description for this stage. And you can share this stage across multiple tools. So let's say we are talking about finalizing the migration and performing an upgrade. This stage has two tools. So you can define the description of the stage. So it essentially rewrites both of these tools as a single tool. And when the model invokes these tools, it gets the response as the two tools that are contained within the stage. Again, you can define descriptions to your stages, to your workflows, and transitions as well. All of this is defined by a tool refresh notification that a server sends. So the ability to transition to a new stage is itself a tool. So the model can say, hey, I want to invoke this tool, which basically means move to the next group and expose a newer context to me. And on the server, it invokes a notification to the client to update the tool set, and the server updates the tool set. The client gets the new tool set in its own window, and it gets access to the newer context.
Okay, because that's what I was right. So you do dynamically change the tool signatures.
Yeah.
So the one question I have with it, because it's fascinating. So it's like basically you're giving the LLM a way to kind of like like to basically move through a workflow. So if you're at this state, so it's like if you're at one state, can you give the LLM an option of like, you can go this way or that way? Like, do they have the ability to choose which path to go forward?
Exactly. And I think that's what we found really helpful for users, because previously you used to load everything in the same time in the context window. Now the agent and the LM has the option to discover its own path based on an ambiguous user prompt that may require a unique combination of tools in order to invoke the goal. And now the LM itself can self-discover newer tools and newer context until it reaches termination. And that allows us to load a lot more context, lot more tools on the server side, with only a limited context that's visible to the LLM.
So because like one of the things that I hate about workflow systems is this idea of basically mapping inputs and outputs. So it's like you have a stage and then you have to take the output and somehow map it to the input, and that requires a data transformation and all that stuff. You just ends up being very complicated, effectively programming done in like a visual way or a declarative way. But it sounds like the way that you've done this is like the inputs to each step in the workflow, like the inputs would actually come from the LLM. Like so the LLM would form what's the input to the next stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And you can even not define a workflow. So you can even define these unique stages, which are tool groups. And these are exposed as flat tool lists to the LM, right? So if you have 100 tools, you define them in 10 groups. You can just choose to have them unconnected, and there's always available. If they're connected, then we make sure that the next stages are visible once you transition to a newer stage.
That's really fascinating. So, I mean, what do you say about like the idea? Because I know there's as soon as you swap out the tools, you then break off the caching. So is that a concern for you if you're changing tool signatures?
Yeah, so I think the advantage we get from changing the tool signatures and exposing newer context, managing the LM's context window is a lot more. So for these high reliable, high stake use cases where the cost of error is too high, users would prefer to unlock and dynamically navigate through tool sets and let go of performance or caching, because that's probably a few milliseconds of delay that they get. And dynamically exposing new tools is much better option.
Like another thought is because like, with the MCP, because if you're dynamically switching out tools, like one thing is like the LLM loses any historical context of like what tools were previously available. So it's kind of like you're swapping out its memory, its state of the world. Because I was wondering, because like the kind of the counter of what's happening is like with like the coding assistants is like everyone's like, oh, we'll use CLIs and stuff. And so the interesting thing is like if you have if you kind of like delegate this all down to like CLI calls or whatever, and you dynamically change things kind of at that layer, the LLM actually would see how things change because it looks at history, so it knows like the context. It's like, have you run into any problems with that where it's like, because it doesn't really know, oh, like previously, like on the previous stage, I had these tools available, but it doesn't know that anymore. Like that's gone. And because now it's only at this stage. Is that like an advantage or a disadvantage or, yeah, have you seen,
Yeah, and this also depends on how you implement the client. So the client itself, when it connects with the MCP host, it can choose to always append the previous historical messages in the request history when it makes a new message call to an LLM inference provider. So it can always choose to pass the previous 9 messages. So the LM provider always has context of what has happened before. And this can also be done on the server side, that assuming you have a very large context window, it gets elapsed. So server can gently provide as a simple prompt that, hey, you are on step 5 of a workflow that has 10 steps. You're currently navigating XYZ. This is what you need to do. So this can both be done on the client. Usually on the clients, at least the Concierge client that you'll see always provides these last few messages as context when it appends a newer message to the conversation. So the model always have historical context. But this can also be done on the server side.
Interesting. Oh yeah, because it does. Oh yeah, because I run into problems with like some LLM providers where like it doesn't like if you dynamically change the tool names, because in the history it has like tool IDs that refer back to tool names that previously existed. So I had to do weird hacks of like keep the tool name but then like blank it out and stuff. But no, this is fascinating because I've seen really good success with prototyping similar systems kind of to this, where it's like much more basic, which is kind of like you create a tool which is like you feed the input in, and then the result of the tool tells the LLM like kind of what to do next. So then you completely gate the behavior, like you can completely control or constrain the behavior of the LLM because you have this programmatic interface where it's like, well, they can't do that because this thing breaks it. It's like this idea of having the LLM has to follow very specific rules, and then you can constrain it. So this is really neat. It's really fascinating. Is it all open source? Because you had said you could.
Yeah, completely open source, Apache 2.0, so users can clone and bring this in their own infrastructure. Yeah, I completely agree. I think because MCP is so generic, people are finding different ways to accomplish their use cases. So some people prefer opinionated workflows, others prefer, dynamic, like just random flat tool list that works as well. So from use case to use case, I think people are building their own solutions.
Yeah, and I think I like the approach you've done here, because I'm not a fan of workflow, a lot of the workflow based solutions, because they're so rigid. But obviously, if your process is rigid, you want to enforce a process. But it's specifically what I was saying is, like, what really bothers me is it comes into data mapping. Is as soon as you have to start mapping inputs and outputs, that's where it gets very complicated and it doesn't seem worth it. And you've kind of worked around those issues, so I like it. So besides being open source, you also have you have a product like you can go to and sign up.
Yeah, Darren. So we also have getconcierge.app, which is the managed version of this. So we're completely free right now. You need an OpenAI API key or LM provider key to configure your own use case. But right now we are free. We are working with enterprises for larger scale deployments. That's when we charge a bit. If you need dedicated tenants, you need reserved VMs and whatnot. So it's available on getconcierge.app. Yeah.
And then are you doing anything with like integrating with MCP apps or the ChatGPT and so you can expose those actually to ChatGPT?
Yeah, we are actually working on that. So in the future, you will soon be able to load JavaScript files, HTML, and they can load on the client side. And again, because this is all powered and backed by MCP, we can conform to the same stuff that's happening in MCP. But now you have a lot more power, like stateful servers and whatnot. So that's in progress. It should be available shortly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a question about, would MCP tasks be a good method for these types of workflows? It seems like you guys kind of take it to the next level with that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan. This can be done. It depends on both tool and tasks would be great. It depends on the use case completely. If it's a long running tool, you probably want to go with the task. If it's a short thing that you still want an opinionated, you still want to be in an opinionated flow, you can still continue with tools. So depends on the use case. Both I would say are possible. So would love to know what you think.
Do you have support for tasks, like proper MCP tasks?
Not yet, but we have that in the roadmap. Not yet.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of MCP tasks. It's not it didn't make sense to me. It's not to me. It's not grounded in an actual use case. I don't know where you can possibly use it because there's no clients, nothing integrates with it. It doesn't. So everything I'm seeing is it makes more sense to have a tool call, just return back a result, which is like, oh, here's an ID, and you can check later. That's what everyone's doing these days. So I actually I've yet to see tasks be useful. But if someone could figure out something with them, that'd be great.
True.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Thank you so much, Arnav, for joining us today. As you mentioned, you can go to getconcierge.app to check it out. And I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you not next week, but the week after. All right.
All right.
Bye.